In this video, we're going to name covalent compounds and write their formulas. For your covalent compounds, this is made up of two nonmetals sharing their valence electrons. The ones that are going to share their valence electrons are only nonmetals, so this little portion of the periodic table right here. With your covalent compounds, they do not have any polyatomic ions, they don't swap and drop. All that we need to do is we need to know some prefixes in order to tell how many of each of the different elements are there. So your prefixes, if you have mono, that means that there's 1, di is 2, tri is 3, tetra 4, penta 5, hexa 6, 7 for hepta, octa is 8, nona is 9, and deca is 10. What these prefixes are going to tell us is how many of the different elements are there. So if we have 6 carbon, that would be hexacarbon. Or if we have 2 oxygen, it would be dioxygen. So we need to know these in order to name our covalent compounds. Now the other things that you need to know is we don't swap and drop with these because they don't actually have charges because they're sharing electrons. So don't swap and drop. You also don't reduce these down. If you have 2 carbon and 2 hydrogen, it stays 2 and 2. Don't reduce it like we did with our ionic compounds. And then the other weird rule is your first element name cannot have mono for the prefix. The second one can, but the first one cannot. So using these rules, we're going to go through a few examples, and I'll leave the prefixes up there. The first example that I have is disulfur dichlorine. Now your first element name is going to stay the same. Your second element name is going to end with, oops, I wrote that wrong. I apologize. It should be dichloride. Your second element name is going to end with IDE. So just like we did before, first element name stays the same. Your second one is going to end with IDE. So now our prefixes tell how many of the different elements are there. So I have disulfur, so that means that I have 2 sulfur. Remember, our numbers come after the symbol, so S2. Dichloride means that I have chlorine, but I have 2 of them, so S2Cl2. On my next example, I have iodine, hepta, fluoride. Now there's no prefix in front of iodine here. And that's because your first element name cannot have mono for a prefix. So that means that my iodine heptafluoride, I have 1 iodine. Fluoride is fluorine, so F, and hepta right here is the number 7, so I have IF7. My last example, when I have the name and I need to give the formula, I have nitrogen dioxide. So again, there's no prefix out front here, so that means that I have 1 nitrogen, so just an N. Dioxide means that I have 2 oxygen, so I'm going to write down O2. Now if you have the formula and you need to give the name, you're going to follow the same general rules, that the first element name stays the same. Second one is going to end with IDE, and I use these prefixes to tell how many are present. So if I have 2 nitrogen, the prefix for 2 is di, so I'm going to put di-nitrogen. My second element name, I have 3 oxygen. Your oxygen written second is oxide. 3 is tri, so I have trioxide. So this one is called dinitrogen trioxide. 2 nitrogen, 3 oxygen. My next example, I have Ni3. For my Ni3, nitrogen, there's only 1 of them. I cannot put mono for my first element's prefix, so I'm just going to write down nitrogen. Now I have 3 iodine, so if I have 3 iodine, that means that I have tri, and then iodide starts with an I, so we actually don't have to write that second I. So this one is nitrogen triiodide. Now in this last example, I have N2H4 for my numbers. So if I have N2H4, I have 2 nitrogen, so dinitrogen. 4 hydrogen. Hydrogen is going to change to hydride. I have 4 of them, so that means that it's tetrahydride. So N2H4 is dinitrogen tetrahydride. Now the biggest thing to remember with your covalent compounds, this only happens when you have 2 nonmetals. That's the only time you get prefixes. A lot of times after we learn how to name covalent compounds, when people go back to ionic, they want to put prefixes on them all. Don't do that. That's a pretty common mistake. You only use these prefixes if we have 2 nonmetals.